Hey, this is Nick Millivoy.
And this is Jason Shadrick.
And this is the 100 Guitarists podcast, where each episode we are talking about one of the 100 guitar players we think you should know. Today, we're talking about a guy that just about any fan of classic rock, it would be impossible to be a classic rock fan and not know Joe Walsh.
That's right. You know him from the Eagles, from the James Gang, from a million other things. From just
his
being,
solo work.
From the solo work, exactly. Slide player, you know, he's all there. So we had to bring in a very special guest to talk about Joe. And so I went behind the cheese curtain, went up to Wisconsin, knocked on his door. Hey, Greg Koch, can you come down and talk about Joe Walsh? He goes, I'll be right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came all the way back here, and I left him in Wisconsin, and we just did it remotely. We could have done it in person, but no.
Right.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. Everybody needs to see the orange room that he's so well known for. So yes, we have Greg Koch today on the show.
Well, thank you to Greg for coming on. You're gonna really enjoy this one. Before we get to talking to Greg, we want to remind you, you can get at us by sending us an email to 100guitarists@premierguitar.com. You can also leave us a voicemail or send us a text to 319-423-9734. We love to hear from you. Before we talk to Greg, also, we want to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Epiphones, inspired by Gibson Custom Shop Electrics. Gibson is excited to share the new additions to their core Epiphone lineup, updated with features that make these guitars better than ever, with new vintage gloss finishes, rosewood fretboards, U.S.-built pickups from the Gibson Pickup Shop, loads of vintage correct details. Jason's going to tell you about that in a second, and historic inspired cases. These guitars bring custom shop quality to players everywhere at accessible prices.
And all of the models, they feature the same, like you said, the same pickups as the U.S.-built models. They also have new headstocks. So they're vintage appropriate headstock shapes. That's right. The Firebird looks like a Firebird, right? The Les Paul's open book, Gibson style headstocks. That's all it takes. Get the open book there. You play 15% better. Easy. Easy. So check out the full line of the premium Epiphone models to complement their full array of instruments for players of all levels at Gibson.com.
All right, so now let's bring on Greg to talk about Joe Walsh.
Greg, thank you so much for joining us today. I know I had to go through all four of your assistants to get this scheduled.
Yes, all four of my personalities.
That's right, but I'm glad you are joining us today to talk
Thanks
about
for being here.
Well, my pleasure.
What I would say, and I want to dive into this first, but what I would say is the quintessential classic rock guitarist.
Oh,
I would say that that's not an untrue statement.
Right? We're going to get to that because today we're talking about Joe Walsh. But first, before we get to that, Greg, you have been touring like a mad banshee all over this country.
Yes.
So tell us what is going on in the world of the Koch Marshall Trio and all things Greg.
Well, thank you for asking. Yes, it's been going well. We've been, we did a kind of a compilation blues record with a couple new tracks on it, because I've got records going back to, we were talking before we went on camera about, how old we all are, how old I am anyway, and been putting out records for a long time. So when I started working with doing some stuff with Devin, he's like, hey, let's put out a record that gives somebody, a little sampling of what you've done. So anyway, we put out this record that was kind of a compilation of the bluesier stuff on all my previous records, plus a couple of new things. And we've been touring behind that, and it's been going great. We did a summer tour with the Allman Betts Band, opening up for them, and then I would play with them. And then Devin Allman's Blues Summit, I went out with them, opening up for them, and then sitting in with them, doing a bunch of our own shows. We did a show with LA Guns, and that was a blast. And we're probably going to do more of that. I was very interested to see how our thing would go over with their crowd, but I pivoted a little bit. Put a few more of my more rocky tunes in there, and they
packed one more distortion pedal on the pedal board.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was crazy. I don't want to sound, too much like a creeper, but there was at least a third of the crowd was women. And I was like, screw these blues gigs. I'm gonna do these rock and roll gigs, because these people still draw members of the opposite sex who are wanting to rock, and rock they did.
And I'm sure they all were eyeballing your pedal board the whole gig.
Oh, they were. They're saying, hey, you silver devil, show me your pedal board.
So you got the blues record. You're on tour. What's coming up? You're working on another trio record. What's happening?
We've got a few tunes in the can that we're going to do a little EP with, and then I think we were just talking about what the next move will probably be. After we go on this European tour here in a couple of weeks, we're going for about 3 weeks over there. We're going to come home, and then for the remainder of the year, I'm just going to do online stuff and maybe a trip or two out to Wildwood. But we're going to try to get, we're probably going to do a live record. I think that makes the most sense because that's what everyone asks for. Where's the live record? And we really haven't done a full-on live record. And we go out again with Devin Allman in February and March again for a nice West Coast thing. We're going to be going out to earlier in January. We're going to go out to the West Coast just with the trio doing gigs. And so it's going to just keep on keeping on. But I think that live thing is probably what's going to be our next move. And because
it's funny it's funny you say that because like your studio records feel so live as it is. I had to think like, oh yeah, you guys haven't put out a live record, and I've seen you a couple times now with the trio, and it's like it's a different. Even though you probably record fairly live,
right?
Totally.
Probably
not a lot of overdubs. There's something about that kind of feedback loop with the audience in there that's going to add something.
Absolutely, especially since we've been doing so much touring and in different scenarios. When you're opening up for somebody, you have a tendency. We're doing like a half hour, 45-minute set. You put together a set that you want to annihilate, and then that gets kind of perfected. And then you're realizing, there's a live thing here that has not yet been fully documented and needs to be done. And needless to say, in this day and age, that is a cost-effective way to go about doing some recording as well.
That's right. I mean, you don't have to bring out the mobile truck out back.
Exactly.
And have it do it.
The Rolling Stones, a mobile facility.
Yes. We need a semi truck to get this trio gig on tape. That's the only way.
Exactly.
That's the only way.
Exactly.
That's the only way. So today we're talking about one of my classic rock heroes. Yes. I'm assuming probably on your pantheon of favorite players.
Absolutely.
And that is Joe Walsh. Now, I will say, Greg, you grew up in a slightly different era than Nick and I did. So when was the first wave of Walsh? When did that hit you? Was it the James Gang stuff? Was it the Eagles stuff? When did his playing first kind of get into your soul?
Well, I remember listening to the James Gang early on because I roomed with my brother who was 14 years older than I was. So I remember we had James Gang Rides Again, and we had the Your album and Thirds actually. We had all three of those James Gang records with Joe Walsh on it. We didn't have the live one though. So I remember I was addicted to the tune "Walk Away" from the very earliest memories.
It's a good one to be addicted to.
Yeah, and of course, Funk 49 was a big one, but there was also a version of "Stop," that old R&B tune, Stax era Sam and Dave tune that they rewired into an incendiary verge that they did on the Your album, and I just loved that thing, and I would listen to it over and over again. But I distinctly remember, now this is, I was born in 66. So 74, my brother brought home the So What record. And I was addicted to that. I listened to it over and over and over again. And I knew, he had the record with Rocky Mountain Way on it as well, but I would only really listen to Rocky Mountain Way. And that was the only tune I really listened to on that record at that time. But the So What record, man, I listened to that thing all the way through. And even nowadays, when we're traveling around, scouring this great land in the Gristlemaster, I'll throw that record on and just turn it up.
It's funny. Nice. I'm gonna digress here just for a second. But knowing how much time you spend touring in a van or some kind of motorized vehicle.
Yes.
Nick, I'm going to let Nick tell you. Nick has a great idea for what experiment that he did when he was touring a lot in a motorized vehicle. Nick, why don't you tell him about
this that? This is not my concept. I learned this on tour. But basically the idea is it's a challenge, and you challenge, you collectively come up with somebody you're going to challenge. And so the Joe Walsh challenge, for example, you listen to their entire output.
Yes.
If you're thinking about a player, or you're thinking about a solo output, you got to decide this thing. If I were doing Joe Walsh, I'm a purist. I would pick, James Gang would be in there, Eagles would be in there, solo discography, all of it goes in there. and you have to listen to all of it consecutively above conversation volume. And
I like it.
And that's how you decide if you really like somebody. Not everything holds up to the challenge. Butthole Surfers, I was very tired of on the tour where we did a Butthole Surfers challenge. It was days of driving. And it's you don't break it up. You can't listen to anything else in between.
Right.
So it was days of driving, listening to the Butthole Surfers, and eventually this band that I thought I loved was like, oh my God, there's so many.
If I have to hear one more thing, I'm going to die.
It's starting to sound the same days ago, and we're still listening to just the Butthole Surfers, and we've made it from the East Coast to the Midwest. ZZ Top is the only one I've done where we came back and continued listening to ZZ Top. We got to the end and we wanted to hear more ZZ Top. Well, we went back for highlights.
Yes.
That's how you really, really know you like a band. So,
I've been doing a similar thing lately, not with such scientific, shall we say, borders, but I got into Oasis. I missed them the first time around, and I listened to them beginning to end. Language. I listen to them nonstop these days. My loved ones are like every time I'm whistling one of those, I can't stop. I'm whistling those songs, making up new lyrics to the song. It's nonstop. And then I'm even doing that thing you did as a teenager. I'm rolling down the windows and cranking it so that everyone can hear it when I'm in my car.
You know who you need to talk to, Greg? You need to talk to Sadler.
Yeah, I know. Well, see, this is the funny thing is that he would post, like before they even announced that they were going to do a reunion, I'd see Sadler's post going, another day goes by and no Oasis reunion. I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with this guy? You know, that was because the first time they were around, I was like, this is kind of like a garage band Beatles. You know what I mean? Because I was doing my own thing at the time, and it was just kind of a little bit past for me to care about. And then all of a sudden, although I can't help but think if I heard that song Super Song, I wouldn't have liked it at the time. But anyway, so when they were going to do this reunion and they started to post some shit, the tune that destroyed me, which forced me to listen to their entire arsenal, was that tune Acquiesce. When I heard that frickin' song, I was like, oh my God. If people
and
think
how they sing, how Liam sings the verse and Noel sings the chorus.
It's epic.
Oh.
It's diabolical. So yes,
gosh.
But that's been my latest immersion.
We did an episode of this
next.
Well, you know what's funny is
whoa. Yeah. Blur is not. Let's.
Well, interestingly enough, I've tried to bathe in Britpop after that, and I found some stuff I like. I mean, I like
13
that I'd never heard of before. Album. You know, there was, I can't remember the names of the band, but I'd hear a tune or two and I'd be like, yeah, I dig that. And then I've been trying to bathe myself in Johnny Marr, and there's some cool tunes, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. So we did an Oasis episode with Sadler. Okay. And it was right after they announced the reunion, I believe, right, Nick? Because it was like, yeah.
I think we planned the episode before it was announced, and by the time it happened, it
announced, right?
If I remember correctly.
And man, it was so great. I acquiesced. I'm telling you, Talk Tonight, Little by Little.
Oh yeah.
So
they're all good.
Gosh, they're all good. They're gonna. I'm gonna say it right now. Wouldn't be surprised if they play Summerfest next year.
Yeah, you never know. I would go. I mean, I wanted so bad to go. My wife's like, after she knew I got into it and forced them all to start listening to it. My oldest daughter doesn't even play guitar. Wanted me to teach her Champagne Supernova, which of course I did immediately. And all of a sudden I get in the car and my wife's phone locks to the old Subaru, and sure enough, Oasis is on there. I was like, yes, yes. So my wife's like, let's go see them. Where are they playing next? I'm like, yeah, well, they were just in Mexico City. Let's go. I go, that's next. It's like tomorrow. Yeah. So, you know.
And it's completely sold out.
Exactly.
We couldn't even get tickets. They played one night in Chicago. I was hoping for 2. I might be able to make it. Didn't make it, but let's hear 2026. I might be planning some things around their tour schedule.
I'm with you 100% because that is a rock and roll band, plain and simple, and they are a rare breed. And plus, they just sit there, they just stand, and Liam is like the coolest front guy. It's like you look at Mick Jagger in comparison, you're like, I kind of like this guy just sitting there and snarling at me.
Doesn't move. I believe the kids
tambourine
call
every
that,
now and again.
My daughter said the kids call that aura farming.
Oh yeah, well he's
when
doing
you're
it.
just
Yeah,
standing-
when he just stands there like this and looks out and
Yep.
then starts blessing himself with his holy water of the beer.
With
I
the
mean,
Tambo.
he's out of his mind, and I'm here for it.
I'm so glad that this Joe Walsh episode could spend a few minutes on Oasis. But there's a thread here.
Absolutely.
There's a thread here of like in your face, loud guitars, rock and roll.
Yes, and
Right?
and where the connection is too is like someone after I posted a couple of tunes of me Blue and Oasis, like this is what Oasis would have sounded like with a decent guitar player. I was like, hang on a second. I go, Noel is an awesome guitar player. His tones are ridiculous, and he plays exactly what is called for as far as the tune is concerned. You're not missing anything. And Joe Walsh is the same way. He's got more facility, he's got more touch, but he only played what he thought was indicative for the tune. And everyone, I do tire of people like, oh, you've got to serve the song. It's like, well, it's all about music. And sometimes serving the music means you go postal on the guitar and you do crazy stuff, or you sing acrobatically, or whatever the case may be. But there's also something to be said for just stoic statements that are in your face that just do a thing. And Joe Walsh, right on the money.
And I mean, Joe's solos are very singable. He was never like,
right,
I'm gonna melt your face.
Right.
That was never his. That's what to me made me think he's the quintessential classic rock guitar player, because I don't know, this term classic rock, Greg, was invented in our lifetime.
Right.
And it did not coincide with when this music was at its peak of popularity. Let's say.
Correct.
You know, so when the Eagles and James Gang and stuff came out, I mean, it's almost like, in a way, like yacht rock, not in style, but in terms of classification, because yacht rock, what we all came out during a period of time, and then much later they're like, well, we need a term for this group of music that Michael McDonald had a hand in.
Right.
You know?
Although Rick Beato just did a diatribe about that.
Yeah, right. It's yacht rock, Rick. Sorry. That's just what it's I don't know what to tell you, buddy. You can't move mountains like that. It's just how it is.
Well, you know what I was thinking about as you were saying that, I was kind of thinking about this the other day. I think what makes that classic rock era of bands so interesting, and why they've managed to maintain popularity and so on and so forth. One of the reasons is I think every one of these bands that we're talking about, whether it be the James Gang or Cream, Led Zeppelin, Allman Brothers Band, Black Sabbath, whatever the case may be. You look at these bands and they had a real connection to the very roots music that it came from. Whereas I think a lot of the metal bands and so on and so forth that would proceed, and maybe to some extent, the yacht rock thing, although they were probably still pretty much influenced by the original stuff as well. But then as the bands came in the 80s, kind of where they start the clock was more like Led Zeppelin, you know what I mean? Or Cream. They didn't really listen to the stuff prior to that. So there wasn't like this direct stream to the source. So I think one of the things about classic rock that makes it so different is that there's an underlying organic thing, a connectivity to the original roots music that it was derived from, instead of kind of just being shoved down the line, which is,
I love this classification of classic rock specifically because I've been thinking about this a lot listening to my local classic rock radio stations, right? So it's like our classification versus of the genre versus the radio classification of the genre.
Right.
Which the radio classification is trying to stay somewhat relevant to younger people. Younger, not meaning young people, but people younger than the original listeners of classic rock radio. So it's like, when I grew up listening to classic rock radio as a teenager in the 90s, that stuff was 20 to 30 years old. And now stuff that's 20 to 30 years old is very different. And that's still, there's still, all the old stuff is still there. But it's like when I turn on my classic rock radio station that I used to, something like Joe Walsh also gets played on, but it has, always been played on in my lifetime.
Right.
And I hear Nirvana, which I love. I'm a huge Nirvana fan, but when I hear Nirvana on a classic rock radio station, like I get the time period. I can't argue with that.
Right.
Nevermind came out 34 years ago. In that sense, it is classic, right?
Correct. But is it classic rock? No.
But right. Is it classic rock? I think that what you just explained is the tighter definition of classic rock, right? It's like it's about where it comes from, not just about like how long it is before the present day.
Right.
Right.
Yes. I like it. I like what we've done here.
Yeah.
Yes,
we're doing
good work. Because I'm thinking when I started playing guitar, I was aware of the Eagles because my parents would play that. And, Eagles came out like their peak was like you're probably better at this. What
late
would you say,
70s,
like,
late 70s, 1980
late
they were
70s.
done, right? Yeah.
Right, yeah. So let's say 78. So that's about roughly 20 years ago. So if we think now Oasis is more classic now
Correct.
than the Eagles were in the mid 90s.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
It's hard. It's hard to fathom, but yes.
See, we're going to connect all these dots. But my introduction to Joe Walsh, or at least his catalog, and Nick's going to love this answer. Nick probably knows exactly what I'm going to say. And I think a lot of people, and I've said this several times during the course of this podcast. The first time I heard a James Gang song, it was by Fish.
Oh, no kidding.
I'm not surprised.
It was by Fish, and I can't tell you how many songs or artists I was turned on to because Fish covered one of their tunes. Because I'm a jam bander from way back.
Yeah, well, again, I think it all stems from where you start the clock, and we have where your entree was, and that depends on what age you are, who exposed you to music, where you are in your family. If you're the oldest, you didn't have somebody older than you kind of showing you the way, other than maybe your parents. My parents were World War II generation, so unless it was big band stuff or Trini Lopez, they weren't hipping me to much,
Mm-hmm.
But my older brothers and sisters, my older brother, he went to high school from 66 to 1970, and he was very much into music, so I had access to all of that stuff.
That's the golden age right there.
Indeed, of classic rock, if you will.
Right.
But I want to go back to what we were saying about Joe Walsh, like his playing being the quintessential classic rock guitar player. It's like for all those reasons that like really puts him in the right in position for that title, right? And I've always thought, like, getting ready for this episode, I never really thought about it before, but it's like if I start thinking about like what does Joe Walsh sound like, right? And I start to get into it, it really is just like exactly what you expect that time period, 70s mostly, 70s, early to mid 70s guitar playing to be. It's like if you just imagine what that guitar solo sounds like,
right?
Not oh, this guy does this thing but he taps, or this person does this but has like is really into jazz. It's like no, just within the limits of what we're defining as classic rock right now. That's the guy, Joe Walsh.
I think so as well. But I think one of the things about Joe Walsh that makes, because of that era, to me, it was always obvious who really listened to the old blues guys and who just listened to Clapton. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And to me, it was obvious that Joe Walsh had done his homework. And so his vibrato and his phrasing and his sense of tone, I think set him a little bit of apart. And plus he was a bona fide rock and roll. I think that's one of the reasons why the Eagles wanted him on board, is because they wanted a bona fide rock and roll lunatic in their roster. Whereas opposed to some other guys in that era, maybe not quite as much, but he just had that finesse of vibrato. And, and that Bill Simzik, that producer, he brought him in to play on, I think he was on a couple of Albert King records where he was playing rhythm guitar. I can't remember which records, but Joe was on there. So Joe had that. He kind of had that, that real guy bona fides, if you will, whatever that word is, that he was the real deal, and the tone too. It's weird to know, as we all look back, it's like, why did these guys all know that Les Pauls, Strats, and Tellys were the guitars? A lot of it stems from, Clapton did it in Cream, and therefore and then obviously Jeff Beck did it, and then, Duane Allman, and, Mike Bloomfield, it goes on and on and on. But he checked all the right boxes to have that kind of lineage with all the greats up to that point. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. And I think his slide playing is severely underrated.
I think so too. And the
It's
thing
so
is,
good.
it's like he says that he learned from Live at the Fillmore, but where he's different from any of the other Duane Allman acolytes is that he used kind of the Duane Allman open E kind of funkiness, but it's like he expurgated it for export. You know what I mean? It wasn't, it was perfect. The way he did it, it was perfect to be slid into more of a digestible pop rock, if you will, way of devouring it instead of just being, oh, that's too blues. You know what I mean? He just had a touch with it that just made it perfect, but not too off the beaten track that it was a challenge to listen to. Because I love Duane, and the reason why I love Duane so much is because sometimes you feel like it's just on the brink of going off the rails. Joe Walsh, it's not going off the rails at all. It's this perfectly stated, pithy, gloriously phrased thing.
Which makes me wonder how into improvising he is, because his solos they have the energy of improvisation, but they're so melodic that like it must be if those were improvised, it had to have been just a feat of pure magic.
Yeah,
for him to come up with these.
I think you're right. I think it's worked out. I think he, you know, like that live record, which I actually didn't get into until much later, because I was always, what's it called? Don't Argue with a Sick Mind. Is that the name of that live?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I guess when I heard it back in the day, I didn't like it because I loved the studio version with the power chords of Walk Away so much. And when I heard the live version that he did on that record, it was almost kind of disco in comparison. I was like, this will not stand, you know. But then years later, I became obsessed with the record, and that's a frequent selection that's played in the Gristlemaster as we're traveling around. But on that record, I think he's got Don Felder on there as well,
and Glenn Frey.
And a lot of the leads, they're not very long. He just does a little statement. So I think, to your point, I don't think he was really about long improvised things. I think it was, he'd play around with the confines of what he had already worked out. But it was pretty much kind of set in stone what was going to happen. I only saw him live. Well, I saw him live for the first time that I can remember. Was sometime in the late 90s or probably early 90s. There's a place outside of Milwaukee called Marty Zifko's. And the ads on the radio were funny. It's like the Great Hall of Rock, Marty Zifko's this weekend. Joe Walsh.
The name of the place was the guy's name.
Yeah, Zifko's, Marty Zifko's.
Hell yeah!
And they just refer to it as the Great Hall of Rock. And every time I'd go into the place, I'd look up and I'd take my glass and go, the Great Hall, and just be reverential about the whole situation. But he and Gary Richrath was opening up for him. So the late REO alumni, and at that point, he had been gone from REO for quite some time. And bless his heart, it's like he started to get a little bit more, shall we say, robustly proportioned as he got older. But this didn't stop him wearing a cat suit of the sort he used to wear back in the prime days of REO Speedwagon. So that was a visual and oral nightmare. But once they were done, bless him, Joe Walsh came out, and it was back in the day. He just had a power trio. And if I recall correctly, he used to use 2 super reverbs. And he'd have one that was just kind of the chassis, and then the top was the amp, and he'd use all 810s. I might be high on crack, but I don't think I am. And he would use a Les Paul with a Bigsby, and then he had this white Strat that he would take on. He would do Life in the Fast Lane, which is a tune I always loved. I remember when that record came out, I was like, that tune rocks with the intensity of 1,000 Suns. I may be in 6th grade, but I know what rocks, doggone it. And that song brings the heat.
Well, I heard one time in one of Bukovac's videos where he was reminiscing about the tour he did playing in Joe's band.
Yes.
About how surprised he was about how much high end was in Joe's sound.
Interesting.
Because his live tone, because he's like, yeah, I'm setting it up. And it's just like, Joe, Book thought his tone was a bit muddy. And then when Joe would sound check and he walked in front of his amp, it was like
a blizzard of nails.
He's like, how can you? He's like, man, it might not sound good here, but back there, it's gonna.
It sounds great. Yeah.
It sounds great. You know what I mean? And when you mentioned that 2 super reverbs, that tracks.
Yeah.
Like 2 super reverbs fired up. Those treble controls are a dangerous weapon.
They can be
super reverb.
Yes.
Super reverbs.
Absolutely.
Man, Nick, what's your Joe Walsh connection? When did you start that James Gang cover band in 8th grade?
I didn't do that. I remember I learned how to play Funk 49 before I ever heard Funk 49. My guitar teacher showed it to me. My guitar teacher was like, check this out, James Gang. And then and I remember him being like, you gotta wait on the radio. Wait till they play Rocky Mountain Way. Look out for Rocky Mountain Way. And then it was like, when are they going to play Rocky Mountain Way? And eventually, I don't know how much time passed, but it's like I was waiting to find, this was a period where there was no streaming music, but there was also, like finding a 45 of it wouldn't have been easy.
Right.
And, there were no singles, right? There was no singles in the mid late 90s. There were cassette singles or something of current things, but there was no way to go find Rocky Mountain Way. And CDs were like $20 and I was like 14. I didn't have $20 for a CD I'd never heard. So it was like, okay, I have to wait around on the radio until Rocky Mountain Way comes on. But eventually there was that moment where I heard Rocky Mountain Way for the first time.
It's a glorious
so
thing.
Cool. And it's funny now because I remember thinking it sounded like so old and raw and like lo-fi, and I wouldn't assess it that way. I mean, it's raw in its way, but it's a produced major label recording.
Right.
It's not but I had, this picture I built of what Rocky Mountain Way was. I think it's like the vocal sound, like whatever's on, it's like the flangey vocals or something like that. And
right.
Like, this just sounds so dirty and so nasty. It probably was coming out of like, a car stereo that wasn't a very good car stereo when I heard it for the first time. So like, I remember that's like my early Joe Walsh, just like putting him on my radar outside of the Eagles is just Rocky Mountain Way, because I didn't like the Eagles. And I remember my guitar teacher being like, yeah, but Joe Walsh is really good.
Right.
Like, it's not for me. He's like, this is where you go.
Yeah.
So it's Funk 49 and Rocky Mountain Way. I mean, I kind of stand by that. If I were showing him to anybody right now, that's where I would go.
From a guitar perspective, yeah.
Like I'm probably I'm not going to go to ILBT. I think that's fair to say. I'm not going to point somebody in that direction, but unless we were joking around about best songs of the 80s, I might throw that in there just to catch somebody's attention.
Well, we've been doing Funk 49. It'll probably end up on the next record. We do an instrumental version of it, and then in the middle we'll do the power chords during the drum solo. We put in the power chords from Walk Away, and then we go back into the tune at the end, and then we jam over the 2 chords, and it's pretty ferocious, and people go crazy because it's just such a great jam.
Nice.
And what's a fun thing I like to do? Well, I want to talk about this is. You were probably I don't know, elementary, middle school when he joined the Eagles, so I don't know how much awareness you had of this, but I'm curious to what the reaction was when it came out that Joe Walsh joined the Eagles. Like, okay, you got this country rock band, you got this rocker from the James Gang, and I think where that really clicked is that as nice as and good as the James Gang and his solo stuff was before he joined the Eagles, the tunes the Eagles were writing were on a completely different level. I mean, those are some of the greatest tunes ever.
Right.
And I feel like he finally, he found a place where his playing can be enveloped in these songs that are going to get way more listenership.
Right.
They're going to be way more spread across the world, or whatever, however you want to put it, than the stuff he had done before, which I think put him on a whole new level.
No doubt, and put him in a whole new tax bracket as well, if we're honest.
a couple bursts here. That's one time I read this interview and I was trying to find it. This interview guy was going line by line through Life's Been Good. And he's like, have you ever owned a Maserati? Oh, okay. Do you remember what your last house cost? You know, like going line through line and seeing how autobiographical Life's Been Good actually was.
And what was the takeaway?
I don't think he got more than 4 or 5 questions in before Joe was getting annoyed. But you got to think I mean, hey, you wrote the song talking about going 185. Let's talk about it.
You know what's funny? As I get older and you hear, I saw a thing the other day where Kenny Pizzarelli, is that his name? He played bass in the early Joe Walsh band, and they're interviewing him. And anyways, you hear these stories about old rock and roll debauchery. And, you know, when I was young, I debauched, and I was quite good at it. And, but now when you hear the stories like, yeah, and then we did this and we started throwing shit out the window, I'm just like, God, that just sounds so boring in comparison. First of all, I can almost taste the hangover, which is just not worth it as a starter. But, you know, throwing everything out your window and then waking up the next day in a hotel room that's completely destroyed with the worst hangover of your life, I'd rather be in bed at 8:30 with the old lady watching Netflix, you know?
So one fun thing is to do, as you know, we've talked about his solo stuff and his Eagles stuff, of course, and those incredible songs, is to look at the old Wikipedia sideman appearances.
Yes.
And there's always a couple nuggets here that are surprising. That he plays slide guitar on Riding the Storm Out.
He does. Riding the storm out. Oh,
right,
yeah.
with your REO connection there that we talked about. He played on Keith Moon's solo album, Two Sides of the Moon. Played a couple of songs on there.
Interesting.
Right. He played on an Andy Gibb record. That would be something. He does scat vocals on an Emerson, Lake and Palmer track.
I bet there are no drugs involved in that
Ooh,
at all.
None.
LA
None.
Nights.
What else is it? He played on Lionel Richie, played on Wandering Stranger.
Beach Boys.
Played on Beach Boys. Yep, Keeping the Summer Alive.
Michael McDonald.
See, he's flirting with yacht rock right here. Now it wasn't. Now if
Winwood.
If Michael sang on, so how would that work? If Michael sang on a Joe Walsh track, then that track could be under the. I think that's the connector. If Michael McDonald does literally anything on your track, it's yacht rock.
That could be. But speaking
he
of
also
yachts,
plays on a Foo Fighters song.
Oh, no kidding.
He does. Yep, he does.
But speaking of yachts, and speaking of sailors, and speaking of the Beach Boys, the other night I was going to sleep and I was listening to something, and it segued into another tune. I'm listening to this tune, like, what is this song? And I vaguely remember it in the back reaches of my mind of listening to probably AM radio when I was a kid. But do you remember the song by the Beach Boys called Sail On Sailor?
Man, I knew, but I guess because you said speaking of sailors, I was like, please say Sail On Sailor.
The song is fucking awesome.
Dude.
It's an awesome tune. And you listen to this, like, there's
so
no way that this is a Beach, because I'm not one of these guys that goes, oh, you know, I love the old Beach Boys. Like, I don't want to listen to that shit. Yeah, the harmonies are great. The song structures, yeah, beautiful songs. I don't like it. Just like I don't like a lot of jazz standards. I listen to it. Yeah, I can see where you like it, and it's a great piece of music. I don't want to listen to it. But Sail On Sailor is like groovy, and the changes are cool. And then there's a version of Ray Charles singing it. You got to check that shit out.
Oh, no way. I've never heard that.
Oh, my God. It's the Beach Boys are doing some kind of like TV special in the early 80s, and they're doing, you could tell they got scripted lines. And then we used to go down and sit by the piano together. Yeah, those were the good old days. And now with Ray Charles singing one of our songs, Sail On Sailor, and he just annihilates it.
Dude.
Woo.
I'm telling you
what. Oh, my God. I can't believe I didn't know about this. I got to check this out. I love that song.
Oh,
I think
it's glorious.
That's like, it's one of the great Beach Boys songs. You know, I am a Beach Boys fan. I love the Beach Boys.
All right, and good on you.
All the stuff that you don't love about the Beach Boys, that's what I like about the Beach Boys. But yeah, Sail On Sailor, it's a different kind of song.
Right.
It's not. Who wrote that?
He wrote it
Blondie
with like
Chaplin
Van Dyke
singing.
Parks and some other people. There's all they described. That's how this video got me. It was a description of all these different. They were going to all these different house parties back then in like '71.
And it is a Brian song. Okay, I wasn't sure.
And Brian wrote most of it, but Van Dyke Parks apparently may have overplayed his importance of the song. But I guess Van Dyke Parks was the reason why the Beach Boys were still on Warner Brothers at the time, and they were looking for a single for this record that they'd recorded in the Netherlands or something like that. And they didn't have a song, and he's like, how about that Sail On Sailor song? And I'm just like, how did I miss this? This is a great
you need
song.
to work that into the trio set.
Well, believe me, we're already on it. I played it for the boys. I was like, we need to do an instrumental version of this song because it's gospelly. It's awesome. It's an awesome.
It's just bluesy
Great
enough
chords.
to make you think this ain't the Beach Boys.
Exactly correct.
Yeah.
I did meet the drummer. Was it Dennis? Dennis Wilson. Yeah, I met him when I was a wee lad. It was the summer that Elvis died. So I was 9. No, I was 11. And I was in this hotel. My dad was at some kind of a convention in Indianapolis, and there's this big crowd gathered around this guy, and they're like, that's one of the Beach Boys. And so I went over and I said, hey man, can I get your autograph? He goes, who am I? I go, you're one of the Beach Boys. He goes, that's good enough. And he signed something. I have no idea. Where that autograph went, but
I hope he signed it one of the Beach Boys.
Yeah, that would have been awesome. One of the Beach Boys.
All right. So to wrap this up, I think if I was pointing somebody to something to check out from Joe Walsh, I would say start with James Gang. That to me is his most raw, in-your-face guitar playing.
Yes, and the James Gang live record is awesome. But I would say, my favorites are, James Gang Rides Again. And you could get the greatest hits record, but I think that's kind of a disservice. I like James Gang Rides Again, the record Thirds, and then there's the records, the Your album, just YER, Your album, it's called. And that was probably my favorite of the James Gang records. And then the live record is awesome too. And that is raw it's just filth.
Yeah.
But I think my favorite all-time Joe Walsh solo record is the So What record, even though Rocky Mountain Way is not on it. But that So What record is mid-70s glory, flange guitar, the Eagles doing background vocals on his tunes, and then that live record. What the hell did we call it again? It was like
You Can't Argue with a Sick Mind.
You Can't Argue with a Sick Mind. It's hard to remember, but you can't argue with it. And there's some great jams on that one as well. That's there's 2 drummers, and it's pocket-alicious. They're pounding like demons, the both of them. Plus there's percussion. I love that. I love the fact that Joe Walsh was like, hey, I'm a big rock star now. I can go out with this massive band and probably still make money, as opposed to you can get maybe 2 other.
Don Felder's in the band.
Yes. Exactly.
Don Felder's in the band, and Willie Weeks is on bass.
Exactly.
Ooh.
Willie Weeks. Good God Almighty.
Man. All right. Well, thank you so much, Greg.
My pleasure.
Out and about. Go check out the trio.
Yes.
Look for the version of Sail On Sailor.
Yes, coming to a Beach Boys reunion near you.
There we go.
Now that I've alienated everybody, I don't hate the Beach Boys. I just don't listen to them on a regular basis.
Oasis and Beach Boys
we're gonna
are going to be
out.
the only things. Yeah, Oasis or Beach Boys are going to be the only things people take away from
Oasis, though, I'm here for it all day long. I don't know what it means. Oh my God! Just
when those tour dates get announced, Greg, we're going.
Oh, I'm in 100%. As my daughter says, she goes, "Is it Oasis o'clock?" Whenever when I'm getting in the car, I'm like, "You goddamn right."
All right, buddy. Thanks for hanging. We'll talk soon.
Pleasure. See you guys later. Bye-bye.
All right. So thank you, Greg, for coming on, giving us a little Joe Walsh lesson.
Oof, man.
Letting Jason talk about Oasis a little bit.
That's right. We had to get a few minutes in there.
Mm-hmm.
Guys of my age, grew up in the 90s, played Wonderwall, played Don't Look Back in Anger, Supersonic, all those. They're in our DNA. And when we recognize another Oasis fan, we have to just divert for a minute. That's just part of how it is now that Oasis is back.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you, Greg, and don't forget to check out Greg's trio. Maybe you'll hear a very ripping instrumental version of "Don't Look Back in Anger." I don't know.
That would be great. Tallest trio in the land. Tallest trio in the land. All right. Well, you can get at us at 100guitarists at premierguitar.com. You can call and text us at 319-423-9734. Make sure to like, subscribe, send this to your Oasis fan. Send this to your Joe Walsh fan who you want to get into Oasis. Any of the Oasis Joe Walsh crossover we can get, Nick, is better.
That's right.
It's better for everybody.
And while you're at it, head over to Gibson.com. Check out the Epiphone inspired by Gibson custom electric line. Look at those open book headstocks.
Woo! Open book headstocks where it's
All
at.
new.
All new. All right. We'll see y'all next time.